Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is a marvelous Tuesday morning in the District of Columbia, and I think red is your best color, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say we look like an American flag right now.
We do.
Look at us, so patriotic.
Jinx.
Well, coming up on Rising, I'll be discussing a little bit in my lens about how some CEOs are actually not happy with Trump's business policies.
Also, CNN commentator Scott Jennings, the man, he's referring Keith Olbermann, who's not the man, to the FBI.
And multiple major countries are recognizing a Palestinian state. But first, of course, Robby, what is on your radar?
Well, he's back. That's fast. Jimmy Kimmel is returning to your televisions tonight, or some of your televisions at least, after what will ultimately have been a suspension of less than a week. Disney said in a statement, "Last Wednesday we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It's a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We've spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." One wonders whether Kimmel will suitably address the misinformation that he spread about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I don't think he has any plans to. Democrats, liberals, and the mainstream media, after all, love to pretend that we have this big information problem in our country. It's all the fault of you, those Republicans who spread conspiracy theories and junk science and lies on social media. We're told the progressive Democrats, on the other hand, well, they're honest people who trust what the experts say, and they form conclusions based on reason and logic, not like that pro-Trump MAGA cult. No, no, no. That's why I'm always amused when we are presented with a high-profile example of a liberal Democratic commentator gleefully asserting something that is flat out wrong, as Kimmel did last week on his late-night show. Kimmel said the MAGA gang was trying desperately to deny that the 22-year-old Utah man, Tyler Robinson, who allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk, was not one of them. In other words, he falsely implied the killer was right-wing or was motivated by a right-wing dislike of Charlie Kirk. We know now that that's not true. The suspect's family and friends described him as increasingly left-leaning, particularly on issues of gender. Robinson was living with and reportedly dating a male roommate who was transitioning to a woman. Robinson himself, said of Kirk, "I've had enough of this hatred." So if you think Charlie Kirk, one of the best-known conservative speakers in the country, was too hateful and thus deserved to die, you are left-leaning almost by definition. But we already know this. Here's what I wanted to mention today. It's not just Kimmel who misinformed his audience by promoting this falsehood about the shooter. A huge chunk of self-identified Democrats also believe the lie. That's according to polling from YouGov, which found that Democrats were more likely to believe that right-wing views had motivated the shooter than left-wing views. 10% of Democratic respondents thought the killer was left-wing. 33% thought he was right-wing, 20% thought he was motivated by something other than politics, and 37% said they weren't sure. Now, to be fair, not sure is, I guess, a perfectly valid response, and something other than politics is probably incorrect, but I guess not explicitly disproven. But 10% of them said the shooter was left-wing, and just 33% said he was right-wing. That's a healthy dose of misinformation. Hat tip to my friend Ben Domenech, who noticed this poll and called it to my attention. Now, I don't think it's some catastrophic crisis when a large chunk of the populace is misinformed about something, but Democrats certainly do. Remember all the efforts during the Biden administration and during the COVID pandemic and during the debunked Russiagate hoax to say that misinformation on social media was a cataclysmic problem necessitating government involvement? Remember when prominent right-wing dissenters were labeled disinfo superspreaders? Remember when conservative news sites were secretly blacklisted at the behest of state-funded disinformation research groups? Those efforts were pushed by Democrats and by Democratic administrations. Now the shoe's on the other foot, and liberals really mad that Kimmel is facing the kind of consequences for spreading misinformation that they themselves advocated. They reaped, and now they sow. Of course, the best thing to do now would be to mutually stand down, to reassert basic free speech norms, and promise not to purge dissenting or even incorrect opinions from the internet. Because it's not just Republicans or Democrats who have them. Everybody is wrong about something. Just check these polls. We'll be watching to see if Kimmel addresses his error, his misinformation, on the show tonight.
I'm so excited that you'll be watching Kimmel tonight. I'm so excited that you'll be watching Kimmel with me. We should text and have like a screening. My first thing was that the answer to most questions is money. And so I know you don't like Kimmel. You think he doesn't make money. But I think they said ABC almost lost $4 billion in stocks, people trading their stocks off, and also with people canceling their subscriptions. Hulu, all the people under the umbrella. So
boycotts do work.
So
now liberals are getting in on the boycott game.
Well, I'm just saying that money people want to see Kimmel. So that's the audience spoke up directly, and they made a decision, and they said, "Oh, we had time to talk about it. Fine, but you also lost money. Let's just be honest. This is business." But I also think when you look at those polls, like you're expecting, and you also were expecting Jimmy Kimmel to understand all that we know now that there's been a full press conference, that Kash Patel has released details and documentation saying that this is definitively connected to a relationship and things that he wrote. He wasn't being cooperative at the time that Jimmy Kimmel spoke and did his monologue, so he wasn't misspeaking information intentionally. He didn't have the information that we have
Jimmy
now.
Kimmel?
Or the next day. Yes, the next day is when we had that press conference.
No, it was already by then.
No, it was already decided by Republicans, is what I'm saying. From day one, it was decided this was a left-leaning attack, the radical left. Like President Trump said, the radical left causes tremendous violence. But I actually wanted to make sure, because I've been seeing this conversation happen way too often to make me comfortable. So I want to be sure that we're factual. And PBS did a report last night and looked into this independent research on their own. They also looked into the Anti-Defamation League research. They also looked into the U.S. Government of Accountability stats to see who is committing this violence. And they said they can confidently say that most domestic terrorists happen to be more right-leaning. Yet still, I don't try to paint an entire party for being responsible for any of those actions. They said approximately 75 to 80% of U.S. domestic terrorism deaths since 2001 are actually right-leaning.
You know why it's since 2001?
Why since 2001? Break it down.
They start counting on September 12th.
Okay, but why is that a left-leaning? But why would September 11th be?
Then we're not counting. That doesn't count as left or right.
Okay,
it goes in a separate category of Islamic terrorism, which dwarfs the other two. If you're counting 9/11, if you're not counting it, there is more. But what they do with these statistics. So most of the extremist violence, or the people they're labeling extremists, are white supremacist prison gangs, and most of these violent incidents are them shanking someone else, for lack of a better word, or murdering a spouse or a loved one who they think is informing on them. It is not the actual violence is not politically connected. It is being perpetrated by extremely violent, nasty, awful people who should
As much as you say that the entire Democratic Party must be the party of transgender, whatever that means for you. It's like saying, as much as the Republican Party. No, I'm saying this, like people saying that it's left-leaning violence because he was defending the honor of his transgender loved one. Mm-hmm. Why does that have to do with left-leaning? He's defending the honor of his transgender loved one. People are trying to connect those dots. So then let's also connect the dots of white supremacy to the far fringes of the right. You don't see like the far fringes of the left connecting the Great Replacement theory to what they're arguing for.
I didn't mean that in an insulting way. I'm sure you do understand the difference between like white supremacists or people who join white supremacist gangs when they're in prison. These are violent people, and violence being committed for reasons that align with that ideology.
But there's also,
you see what I'm saying?
But even if we go past, like, let's say 2001, in 1995, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma State
bombing
was
politically motivated right-wing violence.
All right, so like let's just, everyone wants to pretend. Like,
no, I'm not pretending. That's
clearer than this.
Definition.
That is clearer than this instance where you're saying that he was protecting the honor of his loved one and killed Charlie Kirk and he was wrong and a criminal. Again, why does that make him left-wing? I want somebody to really paint the picture to me. Just because he was a transgender man, his whole entire family, he was raised, Jimmy Kimmel had a point. He was raised under a MAGA-supporting family and a young man in college. I know that when I was in college, I was just self-identifying. That's an opportunity to 4 years to grow into who you are. It's a young person that has lived under a Republican household
Said what he disliked
his whole life.
About
He's
Charlie
not
Kirk
cooperating.
Was the hatefulness. And we can tie it to this issue.
You can tie it because you're trying to tie it, but it doesn't mean that he was left-wing. It could mean that he was just defending the honor of his loved one. And so Jimmy Kimmel really, we'll see what he does tonight, but why does he have to explain himself for thinking what the rest of the country was thinking? If most of these crimes are generally right-wing, I'm thinking this is the same thing.
The only thing I agree with you is that a lot of the rest of the country was thinking that, but it's incorrect, as I think.
Up next, the Trump administration is announcing that the FDA believes a mother using TYLENOL during pregnancy could actually lead to risks of autism for her child. We'll be right back.
So with TYLENOL, don't take it. Don't take it. And if you can't live, if your fever is so bad, you have to take one because there's no alternative to that, sadly.
President Trump urging pregnant moms to not take acetaminophen or Tylenol due to what his administration says is an increased risk for autism.
That announcement comes after months of buildup from a bluster from Trump and RFK Jr., insisting that they will find the root cause of what Kennedy called the, quote, autism epidemic, all culminating in Monday's press conference, where the long-awaited answer was Tylenol.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism.
That's a hard word. Following the announcement, the head of the FDA sent a letter to physicians urging them to minimize the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy, but it included a major disclaimer that reads in part, quote, to be clear, while an association between acetaminophen and autism has been described in many studies as a causal relationship, or in many studies, a causal relationship has not been established, and there are contrary studies in the scientific literature. The letter continues, quote, this consideration should also be balanced with the fact that acetaminophen is the safest over-the-counter alternative in pregnancy.
In response to the press conference, Tylenol seller Kenvue said in a statement, quote, acetaminophen, and by the way, I have never known that there was an N in that word. I'm just seeing this for the first time.
What are you calling it?
Acetaminophen is, I think, what I called it, but I'm obviously wrong. Acetaminophen is the safest pain reliever option for pregnant women as needed throughout their entire pregnancy. Rigorous research endorsed by leading medical professionals and global health regulators confirms there's no credible evidence linking acetaminophen to autism.
Now, of course, Tylenol isn't the only target of the administration when it comes to autism. Secretary Kennedy also announced a renewed look into a potential link between infant vaccines and autism. Let's take a look at that.
It looks like they're pumping into a horse. You have a little child, little fragile child, and you get a vat of 80 different vaccines, I guess, 80 different blends.
Some 40 to 70% of mothers who have children with autism believe that their child was injured by a vaccine. President Trump believes that we should be listening to these mothers instead of gaslighting and marginalizing them like prior administrations.
Online reactions to the announcements were swift, with doctors largely disputing the president's claims and many of them making light of them with memes. But Terry Moran, the reporter fired from ABC for his tweet about Stephen Miller, had a different takeaway.
This really isn't about the science. It's about trust. Trust in public health officials, in the public health authorities. And part of that trust has been damaged by vandals like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but also by COVID. What happened during COVID. Some of what people were told wasn't true. Some of what the government did was excessive, and trust was broken. That's the real problem that needs to be solved.
And excuse me, I said Terry Moran, I meant Moran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with him there, which is not something I usually say. So this is interesting. They kind of punted on the vaccine autism link question thing. And, when RFK
What do you mean by that?
Well, that they didn't. They're just kind of waving it. Maybe there's a link. And because Trump was not happy about RFK Jr. beating that drum too loudly, because Trump supports Operation Warp Speed and all of that. I don't know the line about, 40% of mothers of kids who have autism think it was the vaccine. I mean, we can all think whatever we think. It's just
there was a lot in this press conference of what I think, what I feel, and that's beautiful. Yeah. I love those words.
Well, now
we're talking about literature or something like esoteric, but we're talking about scientific.
Okay, but there is.
I know.
I looked at the study.
Fine, me too. But tell me so I can.
So my takeaway from the study was that there was a link found, but the result was a little questionable because siblings of people diagnosed with autism who should have then also had that diagnosis because they were reared in the same circumstance. They were biologically formed with a mother taking acetaminophen. Were not were not diagnosed with autism. So that casts some doubt on the finding. Look, I think it's fine to urge people to maybe be a little bit, or this specific subgroup of people to be a little bit more cautious in the same way pregnant women are urged not to have any alcohol, even though there's actually very little finding that extreme.
Not you telling the pregnant ladies to have a drink.
Well, there's not, because you can't. I mean, reckless drinking would be very bad, but I mean, pregnant women, no, you're the expert on this. You've been a pregnant woman. Know that a glass of Chardonnay every now and then is not going to hurt you if you're pregnant. I mean, that's true. That's contrary to what the FDA says, but it's true. So just being conscious of these things, the way people are about alcohol and whatever else, seems fine to me. A lot of people, myself included, take painkillers just like way too. I chew ibuprofen like candy, and it's probably not good for you. So I don't have any problem really with this guidance.
Well, the thing is, I don't mind looking into anything, but the co-author of the study told Politico, "Oh, you can still take it in low dose for pain reduction." Like, so she's still saying it, but Trump didn't say it.
Well, that's what Trump said. If you're in excruciating pain, you got to take it. There's nothing else to do.
Trump said, I just say don't. He's saying words like, don't take Tylenol. You saw our banner. He's saying that so definitively as if the connection were equally as definitive as his stance, which it is not. There are several studies equal, I think even more, not directly linking the two things. And the problem is that I was pregnant, like you said, and I had a fever before. Like, if you have a high fever, for example, you're telling women, oh my God, you might be the reason why your child has autism, and there's no definitive link. Right. And imagine this woman just is suffering through this fever while pregnant, and then her kid just happens to have autism and there's not a link. It's like, you're going to ruin that mindset forever.
If you have a high fever, having a high fever and being pregnant, would that also presents a health risk? That presents a health risk to the baby, yes. Treat that with
But they say they're beating themselves up for the rest of their lives, thinking that there's a connection now, and that's the problem. Unless we know, we can't go off ideology. I'm happy to look into what people think and what research shows, but when you make a definitive statement as the president and RFK and come up here on the heels of last week, just arguing with Susan Monterez in the middle of Capitol Hill when she's saying, I can't agree with your ideology, I want to go off research and science. This is actually happening in tandem, and parents are the ones left with the brunt of this entire thing and confusion that's happening with the CDC, with the vaccine guidelines, because there are literal examples, even though they're few and far between. Like, our country is very good at vaccinating and making sure children are safe in schools, et cetera, et cetera. However, there still are people that have died in this year because they missed things like their measles shot on the heels of not trusting the CDC because of the COVID response. And now here we are saying, oh, don't take Tylenol if you're feeling terrible.
What if it and vaccines are one of a million different things that are all slightly little variables that in a tiny, tiny, tiny way, in a tiny minority of people, make you a little bit more likely to later be diagnosed with autism. Those two things and a bunch of other things. That seems perfectly like it might be the case based on the studies that. Did
this press conference seem like a tiny little? No, it seemed like I wouldn't do it. Don't. Right. He's sending the alarms.
Link between saying this causes this is not responsible evaluation of where the science is now.
Right, and we heard, like I said, a lot of I feel and parents' feelings are valid, but science is even more valid, and so we need to make sure we're coming to the table with well-reasoned facts and links between doctors.
But with vaccines, is it safe that I believe that they are safe in the extreme, 99.999% of cases, but someone, and not even in the autism front, someone has an adverse reaction to vaccination. One in however many millions of people, it happens. So that you can't invalidate that experience. That doesn't mean
the only thing I agree with that
them.
RFK said is that other administrations have othered those people and made it seem like their claims aren't valid. It's just before you present it to the entire U.S., maybe we should have facts, hard, locked-in facts.
Next up, CNN's Scott Jennings is referring Keith Olbermann to Kash Patel. Find out why. Don't go anywhere. CNN commentator Scott Jennings is referring Keith Olbermann to the FBI.
So it all appeared to start when Jennings tweeted about ABC reinstating Jimmy Kimmel's show.
Jennings wrote, so basically his employer suspended him for being an insensitive expletive, and we don't live in an authoritarian regime. Got it.
Then, according to screenshots from Town Hall columnist Dustin Grace, Olbermann responded in a series of tweets, quote, saying, at Scott Jennings, you're next, but keep mugging to the camera. This prompted Jennings to quote the tweet of a screenshot and the post to the CDC director, post and
CC the
FBI director. I'm like, there's a lot of C's and F's. So he's basically telling Kash Patel, look at this, he's threatening me.
Olbermann deleted those tweets then, but he issued some new ones for apparent clarification. He wrote that, quote, we won and that the last fold to fascism was last week. Then he added, quote, I'll read this in my Olbermann voice. Now we get the fascists off real TV. That'd mean your career is next, Jennings. Send a tape to real America's Voice, but keep mugging to the camera, amateur. Naturally, many conservatives bashed Olbermann for his comments. Podcasters and retired sports broadcaster Michelle Tafoya wrote, "I remember when Keith Olbermann used to be able to use his words very effectively. These days, he resorts to spewing hate and vitriolic nonsense."
Judging by that voice, I think you agree with that last tweet.
Keith Olbermann is so amusing to me. I find him hilarious. He's called for me to be fired from the show. He tweeted at The Hill to fire me and Brianna. He didn't like either of us. He didn't like.
He want the whole show to
He
go.
didn't like anybody. He likes nothing. He seems like a miserable. I kind of feel bad for him. He just seems like a very unhappy human being and emotionally, psychologically unwell. I don't think what he intended to Scott Jennings was a threat of violence. I think he was saying you'll be off the air next, not you'll be dead next. I think it was a reference to Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air, not Charlie Kirk being assassinated. But he's very loose with his calls for your destruction and demise and he's awful.
I think that any other time, I would say we'll go from the top down, and President Trump often tweets like things will be a bloodbath, like I referenced yesterday. We talked about how his tweets are. And so I usually am very forgiving when it comes down to how you're acting on social media. However, I would say in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, there should be even more consideration, especially from media savvy folks. We're not talking about people who don't understand what you put out is next to your name, right? Who don't understand the media industry and how it can be picked up as a story based on 100 characters, should be more mindful in this moment about saying things like that. And Scott Jennings is also extremely dramatic, adding Kash Patel, trying to make a story out of it. He's not fearing for his life.
Jennings.
He's not fearing for his life in any way, but I understand the concern.
Keith
But
Olbermann is the most overdramatic person who's ever lived. Remember, he used to, on his show, he would do segments every week. The worst person in the world with like creepy, like crypt Halloween music.
I gotta tell you, I was a producer
was
at
like-
MSNBC when he was still there.
Yeah,
So,
and,
yes,
and the worst person in the world was like, you know, some lady who didn't, I don't know, acknowledge Martin Luther King Day or something, and that made her the worst person in the world or whatever it was.
Okay, I think both sides of the aisle have dramatic content. We can be honest about that, right? Like, come on now.
That
It's not
very
like
much so, but
everybody has dramatic content.
Nobody can beat Olbermann. Nobody can beat that.
You just have this vendetta against him because he's calling for your job.
I don't even have a vendetta against. I find him. I'm amused by him.
And you should
I don't think of
you
him
should
well.
enjoy
That's
the fact
true.
that
I
he
enjoy
called
it.
for your job because Republicans are doing it now and kind of getting championed for it. So,
Yeah.
you know, you don't mind if people's jobs get called
They
for.
can't
So
cancel me. They've tried. Haven't succeeded yet. Maybe one day.
You got to get Keith Olbermann
careful.
on the show. I think maybe we would have a good conversation.
That would be fun.
I can try to connect the dots.
Oh
for
yeah.
you.
So he's your old buddy.
You guys can't be screaming on the screen though. You
I'm just
can't.
gonna let him go off. I don't try to scream over people, with rare exception.
Okay.
Let you say your thing, and that's on you, brother.
We haven't gotten to a screaming match yet,
You and I.
but we'll still go back.
No, you're too polite. We're not gonna. It's not. We'll see.
We'll see.
We're not talking about COVID enough.
Never say never.
Yeah.
Well,
I know
next
that's what
up-
the audience wants. So.
We'll see, guys. You guys don't
right.
know.
You gotta really-
Next up on Rising, President Trump enjoys painting himself as a sort of financial savior, but the true picture looks pretty different.
They're very red, white, and blue today. Lindsey, what is on your lens?
We are talking a lot about the economy. So when we talk about the economy, Donald Trump likes to paint himself as some sort of financial savior. You know, the guy who knows how to make America rich again. But if you take a closer look, it's a different story. And it's not just the political opponents that are saying this, it's the people who actually run America's biggest companies. So according to a recent survey from the Yale School of Management shared with Axios, quote, in private, the leaders of some of the country's best known companies say that a number of White House policies have been bad for their businesses and possibly illegal. Think about that. CEOs, the ones who usually play nice with Republicans, are whispering about how these policies are actually hurting them. And yet the Axios article says, quote, in public, business leaders are keeping relatively quiet, fearing retribution from President Trump. Translation, the so-called pro-business president has corporate America too scared to say what they actually think. So let's talk about why. Tariffs, or as many like to call it, the Trump turbulence tax. Tariffs were sold as a way to protect American jobs, but in practice, they've been erratic, confusing, and even downright costly. One day the deadline shifts, the next day the rules change, and businesses are left scrambling. And it's not just annoying, it's destabilizing. 71% of CEOs surveyed in this Yale study said that tariffs were directly harmful to their businesses. And 74% agreed with the courts that Trump's tariffs were flat out illegal as executed. Then there's the Federal Reserve. 8 out of 10 executives said Trump was not acting in the country's best interest by pressuring Fed Chair Jerome Powell to slash the rates. On health care, 76% of them think the policies under Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are putting the public health at risk. And let's not forget the new $100,000 fee slapped on H-1B visas, making it harder for tech companies to even hire global talent. So what does this all add up to? Well, businesses are delaying investments, cutting back on hiring, and watching the costs just climb and climb and climb. Consumers, meaning us, are paying more at the register, and the very foundation of our economy, confidence in the rule of law, is being chipped away. Immigration policy is a whole other piece of this puzzle. 8 months into Trump's term, worksite raids have ramped up and the ripple effects hit hard. In California, workforce participation dropped 3.1% in a single month. Among non-citizens, it plunged to 7.2%. That's not protecting jobs, that's actually shrinking our labor force. Farms, construction sites, and food plants felt it first. The rest of us felt it later at the grocery store and in the housing market. And while this is all happening, the federal deficit has ballooned, thanks to large part in Trump's 2017 tax cut paired with new spending. You'll remember that big, beautiful bill. And it's kind of ironic. The man who branded himself as a businessman left the country with a balance sheet that would make any CFO cringe. Now, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, the Yale professor that organized this gathering of CEOs, summed it up best, saying, quote, "They're all afraid of being marginalized by the White House." So that's the bottom line. Trump's economic playbook isn't some genius level strategy. It's just chaos disguised as policy. And sure, it might sound tough on the campaign trail, but the data tells the truth. Businesses are hurting, workers are vulnerable, and our long-term stability is at risk. And here's the kicker. If you still think Trump is the guy who can, quote, save the economy, just remember, most CEOs won't even say that out loud. It's not because they believe it, it's because they're too afraid to contradict him. And to me, that says more than enough.
Yeah, look, I think the Trump administration, I broadly agree with you. I think they should pay attention to how the business community feels about the economic policies. The Republican Party has long claimed to be the party of business, and that, in fact, the business of America is business. And we want a favorable business climate because we believe greater economic prosperity. When businesses are getting wealthy, that is good for the American people. That means goods and services are available to people, and the standard of living can improve, and jobs are available, and all of that. And a contingent of the Trump base, MAGA, really cares about fairness of labor policies and competition from immigration and outsourcing, all things that, yes, are important, but when dealt with in the way this aspect of MAGA and this aspect of the left once dealt with, things get more expensive. Businesses make less money. The price of goods goes up. So to do tariffs, to do some of the immigration restrictions, I think is going to turn off the business community. And now the business community is not going to go running into the arms of Democrats as long as they still have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Zohran Mamdani and AOC as the thought leaders of their party. These are people who hate business, who hate CEOs, who hate profits.
They just want workers to be treated fairly, things like that.
No, MAGA wants workers to be treated fairly.
No, the MAGA is asking to bankrupt companies in order to make sure that we have no migrant laborers. And then we're seeing things like housing, labor shortage.
Elizabeth Warren wants to bankrupt companies for different reasons.
Fine, so there's two extremes of the puzzle. Getting rid of migrant labor.
Join the Libertarian Party, people.
He's recruiting. I just think, there's no solid information. There's a lot of chaos, I think, is the biggest overarching issue. Even as recent as yesterday, we talked about these H-1B visas. One person on Trump's team saying, oh, it's going to be annually. Another person saying, no, this is a one-time fee. Companies don't even know how to move or speak out loud because they aggregated at Yale all these different CEOs that won't say out loud that they think this is chaos. So you have Netflix CEO, oh, this is a great time. But then other people quietly saying this is a disaster. How do you go from less than $2,000 to $100,000, whether annually or one time? It seems extreme, and it's not going to have incentive to probably bring in more workers. It's probably just going to pile more work on one American person that's already working there and then make us not competitive in a global space. And that's just one instance. I mean, over the last few weeks,
they can contract out. They'll just hire the people, keep them in India and China.
Just keep them there and make their economy boost. And then as well, there's companies here that are in the agricultural space. I think we talked about John Deere.
They'll move to London and work remotely from there.
Anywhere, pretty much. And that's why I'm just like, why is MAGA not calling out the fact that the economic policy so far is not at all a mirror of anything that he said on the campaign trail? I mean, the tariffs, he said they would start working immediately. business leaders are saying that it's a disaster. Immigration, he said that he would go after criminals and violent offenders. He's going after everybody. People can't even work. And the California, you saw migrant labor has dropped by a significant percentage.
I think MAGA's thinking is they can do these policies, which the base wants, which are popular with blue-collar, labor union-type people who have been traditionally Democratic voters, who are trying to bring into the Republican fold. They can do those policies, even if they're bad for the economy and they're bad for businesses. They bring in new voters. But the policies aren't bad enough that they lose the Republican CEO because who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for Democrats? I'm explaining to you why they're never going to vote for Democrats. So they're going to keep, those people are going to be upset about it, and I'm upset about it. I agree with them. I am ideologically sympathetic to that group, but they're not in danger of losing their votes because there's no rival party competing for their vote. Elon Musk didn't start the America Party,
it may
so they're
be
staying,
a libertarian
so it's
move
be
and shift, because I even saw a Fox News poll, which I had written down, that 52% of voters believe the president is making the economy worse, and that's a recent Fox News poll that came out this week. So, when you're talking about
rocket science, just cut regulation, cut taxes, leave businesses alone, leave tech companies alone, don't harass them if you're the government, and we'll live in a utopia. But
I think the biggest deal is that there's an opportunity and a window open for someone to say something that makes sense. Like the way that President Trump is handling the economy, and even looking at this Fox News poll citing that half of the country thinks that he's handling it poorly, is an opportunity for Democrats to have come up with a plan for the last 8 months. It's unfortunate, as I've repeated multiple times, that they haven't. But this is not like Republicans midterms to win. This is Democrats to lose once again. Like the stage is open on the economy when people care most about voting for their wallets, like we saw in the last election.
It's a ways off, but it's looking like a mixed result at best.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Anything can happen.
I just can't. And the biggest news we're talking about is Newsom, which his tactics are hilarious to me, but still not speaking to the economy. And Kamala Harris coming at everybody who she ever was associated with last year. So they have to come up with some more. I need to hear some more in the next few weeks. As the United Nations meets in New York, more and more countries are formally recognizing the state of Palestine. After the break, how people are reacting to the UK's controversial decision. Several major countries are now officially recognizing Palestine as a state. The United Kingdom, Canada, Portugal, and Australia all made official announcements recognizing Palestine on Sunday. And France joined them on Monday. Now, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had this to say on the announcement.
We must redouble our efforts to combat hatred in all its forms. We must channel our efforts, united together in hope, behind the peaceful future that we want to see. The release of the hostages, an end to the violence, an end to the suffering, and a shift back towards a two-state solution as the best hope for peace and security for all sides.
Along with the announcement, the UK government updated its map of the area to include a section labeled Palestine rather than occupied Palestinian territories. Political commentator Piers Morgan called it a historic moment in this 76-year conflict, but right-wing activist Tommy Robinson slammed Keir Starmer for the decision, writing, "Starmer just bent the knee for the Muslim vote in the most horrific way. Innocent Israelis were slaughtered en masse by barbaric Islamists, and this vile creature just brought shame on our nation by rewarding them."
This news comes as the United Nations is meeting in New York for its annual General Assembly this week, where President Trump is expected to meet with several leaders from the Middle East. As one of Israel's main allies, the U.S. has opposed the recognition of Palestine.
Palestine being recognized. Look, I oppose the butchery of the Palestinian people that Israel is engaged in, and as an abstract position, I support a two-state solution. I think that there should be a Palestinian state. However, I don't really like this language, like that they deserve a state. Like they don't deserve the state they would have, because the state they would have is under the rule of Hamas. Hamas does not have a right to exist or govern a country. Hamas is a rapacious terrorist organization that attacked its neighbor. And so if the state that is going to exist is one run by Hamas, there's no obligation to recognize it as legitimate, in the same way that the people of Japan have a right to a state, but they didn't have a right to the imperial state of Japan after it attacked the U.S. We went there and we removed that state, and then they got a different one. So as long as Hamas is going to be their political leadership, I am a little skeptical of this notion. I think the still awful but more moderate people on the other part of the Palestine I'm not coming up with it right now, the West Bank.
Okay.
Maybe that's a solution, but it's more complicated just saying, oh, they should deserve a state. Well, states don't have rights. Hamas doesn't have the right to exist. The Palestinians should have their own country and self-governance, but we don't. The Germans held self-governance, and then we took that away from them because they were the Nazis. So,
well, I think we have an agreement of trying to be, or on both sides of the aisle, trying to step out of foreign affairs, and so we cannot go and be everywhere monitoring everybody.
Yeah, I don't want to be
It's
anywhere.
kind of like why we pulled out of Afghanistan, and we see the Taliban is in full effect, and how much of a disaster that was after years and several people dying in a war that we joined into.
Right.
And so you and I talk about that a lot. And so it has to kind of be this notion of like, if most Americans do not want to continue down this path, and most Americans see that this war is not beneficial for us to continue funding at the very least, forget about which moral side of the aisle you're on, then we don't have any business saying what should exist and what not. It's just like we are out of it. But I think when you have when you have Benjamin Netanyahu kind of doing whatever he would like to respond to this, and some people in the UN committing him saying that he has committed war crimes, well, then you have an issue where, even the families of the hostages are asking for Netanyahu to please scale back on some of what he's doing. So you're having several countries across the world say, we're coming together not to make any firm decisions for everyone, but to tell you guys that we are not going to endlessly keep supporting Israel. We're going to put some boundaries around this and say that with coerced action, Benjamin Netanyahu has to come to the table and tell us what an ending to this looks like. And I think that is a legitimate next step, as opposed to just standing by, which we both agree, and just continuously funding whatever. There has to be some parameters around how and when we will support whatever's happening if we're going to continue to support and pay for it. And so to me, that's the biggest issue, by saying maybe a two-state solution, because there has been aggravation for decades, well beyond our lifetime, about what should exist there. And so either we're going to be in it or out of it, but we cannot just say Netanyahu is able to do whatever he likes whenever he likes.
We should be out of it, period. Agree with that. No argument there. We should just be out of it. But Israel is committed to the conflict against Hamas, and they'll pursue it, I think, regardless. I don't know. There's different opinions
without funding,
on whether...
you can't continue to...
Well, they can still buy weapons from us. They just have to pay more money. And, I wish that Hamas would show some indication that it would like to cease to be a radical group, and then maybe we could work with them more closely. For instance, the new president of Syria, who is ex-Al-Qaeda, ex-ISIS, insane, but he wants Western engagement. He met Trump, shook his hand. He was doing an event with David Petraeus that I saw remarks from, talking about wanting to move past war and have dialogue. He wants Western engagement. So even people who are part of vile, evil organizations, they can go the other way, and that should be good. As Tywin Lannister says in Game of Thrones, when your enemies defy you, you meet them with steel and with fire, but when they want to come back into the fold, you welcome them, or else no one will ever surrender. But Hamas gives no indication that it wants to do that.
Well, that's not true, because they were just in Qatar trying to negotiate an end to this thing, or some type of deal.
Oh, yeah, we'll give you half
and then
the
they got.
No, we're sick of hearing half the
Yeah,
hostages.
but then they
all
got
the hostages.
Okay, but
please.
even if we get from half to all, if you're blowing up the place, as Netanyahu was doing, trying to kill people in the middle of them trying to negotiate, then what end result would you actually like here? You can't think that a neutral safe ground like Qatar, which was joining the U.S. and trying to negotiate this thing, should be a place where you should also attack. And that recently just happened. So if there are no rules whatsoever, then even if we agree or don't agree with anything that's happening over there, it's the fact that if there's no parameters to settling this,
is also being unreasonable.
That's how are we supposed to settle it?
Israel's government is being unreasonable. The Netanyahu regime seems perfectly happy to let everyone in the Gaza Strip die, or kill them directly or indirectly. They're going to kill people who are negotiating in Qatar. So they're not really acting in good faith. Neither side is acting in good faith, and so I just don't want to be involved, which is the attitude of most of the American people, as best I can tell. Certainly the attitude of most young Republicans. It's the attitude of everyone on the left. It would be a great bipartisan push to be like, you know what? If they want to work this out and they want our help, we could step in, But if neither side really wants to work this out, they want to kill each other, and that's very sad for the people of Palestine. I wish it was some other way. Maybe we can get them aid, but otherwise we should butt out.
And it seems like out of all the conversations that President Trump has had about being this great negotiator and great communicator, which we see when we talk about Russia, or we see when we're talking about the conflict there, and we see we're talking about the conflict here, it's like, well, get people in the room and have a conversation with European leaders and some of our allies about what a real solution looks like. None of this should be one person's choice, right? This all affects everybody, because
Egypt
everybody's helping putting Egypt. We can talk to everybody properly, but if you all have that indication that you are different and outside of any political fray and just are great with business and negotiations and can get a deal done, then why is a deal not being done here to stop this thing? Like,
but isn't it a little ridiculous that their peer countries, other Islamic Arab countries like Egypt, etc., don't want anything to do with them? The Palestinian people, they don't want to. They want to take them. They don't want to. They all end
Very
up,
ridiculous.
They end up as refugees to Europe, which is causing some level of destabilization. And there's certainly a pushback. The resurgence of some right-wing parties in Germany, right-wing anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK is due to absorbing waves of largely from Syria. But other places, why don't?
Well, I think
why is there no burden on their own?
But I also think that everyone
countries
shouldn't
deal
have to
with
be a
it?
refugee. Like, separating Hamas and understanding that it is a terrorist organization, and understanding that Palestinian people do want to live and exist in the space where they've spent their entire lives and generations, is also a separate thought that you can have, and understand that we should not just be trying to get them to exit so that we can build this, what did President Trump call it, a Riviera in their land?
To this stretch of land for thousands of years, and it's very unhealthy, and this is what comes from it. They should be less attached to the land and more attached to...
But we have to say that on both ends then. We should say that Benjamin Netanyahu should be less attached to trying
You're
to...
right. If I was starting the state of Israel today, I would do it in Canada and not the Middle East. But nobody consulted me when they formed it in an area where they were surrounded by countries and people who hate them. But
here we are.
Too late to take the Robby route. Next up, the White House is unveiling what the new TikTok deal with China is going to look like. Stick around for that. The White House is revealing some of the terms of the TikTok deal that they're trying to work out with China.
Here is White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt yesterday.
Under the terms of this deal, TikTok will be owned by a majority of American investors and controlled by a board of directors with extensive national security and cybersecurity credentials. In partnership with the U.S. government, Oracle will serve as TikTok's trusted security provider, and they will independently monitor the safety and data security of all U.S. user data on TikTok's platform. Americans' data will be stored securely in the United States without access from China. All U.S. user data will be stored on servers operated by Oracle in the United States, protected from surveillance or interference by foreign adversaries.
A senior White House official told the AP that Oracle, Silver Lake Partners, and possibly billionaires Rupert Murdoch and Michael Dell, yes, Dell Computers, still need to nail down the final details. The U.S. will not own a stake or be a part of TikTok's board.
Some U.S. officials have shown concern about TikTok's algorithm, which is now run by ByteDance, and how the Chinese can potentially manipulate it. Here's Leavitt speaking on those concerns.
And the algorithm, I know this is a question many of you have had, will be secured, retrained, and operated in the United States outside of ByteDance's control. And TikTok will remain globally interoperable, meaning TikTok users in the U.S. will be able to see videos posted by users in other countries and vice versa.
TikTok reprieved.
Great. We won't be monitored, or algorithm won't be programmed by Chinese agents, but they'll be programmed by Trump's agents. All his friends, all his homeboys that are now running this thing are just going to send us all the information. It's going to become X all over again, which is very sad for all my friends at TikTok who just were having a good time doing tons of like videos about hairstyles and all the things that I used to watch. And now I'm going to get fine, but it's still a fun place. Just like Twitter used to be a fun place until Elon Musk took it and sabotage. I understand. But also, I want people to understand that ByteDance is technically leasing the technology to these people. And so this new company is going to just have leased technology and program TikTok in the U.S. that way. So it's not like we're just going to be having an endless new TikTok that's run by Americans. It's like at any time they could be like, nah, or whatever. They could. I mean, it's not like we have ownership over the actual TikTok app. So they found a loophole in this whole rule to appease President Trump, who I understand followed through with something that President Biden suggested, which I disagreed with then. And here we are. And now Trump's friends run another app. and I'm just going to stay on Instagram, I guess. You guys can find me there.
Of all the stupid things President Biden did, this might have been this was one of the most mishandled policies, because they banned TikTok or forced it to be sold, and then backed out of caring about that policy at the last minute, even then when the Supreme Court said it is constitutional, even though I disagree that it's constitutional. I think it violates the First Amendment rights of the users of TikTok. It doesn't violate the First Amendment rights of TikTok, because TikTok doesn't have First Amendment rights, because it's a Chinese company. The Chinese are not subject to our rights. To the same extent, even though I always say the First Amendment restricts our government, it doesn't affirmatively give rights to a specific group. But certainly Americans who use TikTok, they have the right to, or Apple has the right to offer it in the App Store, and you have the right to engage with it. First Amendment stops government from messing that up. Supreme Court disagreed. That's where we came to. But then Trump got to say, I'm the savior of TikTok. And this is part of the story of why Gen Z has become like much more pro-Trump than they were previously, why he did well with this demographic in the election. I don't personally use TikTok. For me, I'm a little too old. It's just one more social media site. I'm active on X. I'm active on Instagram like you are. I still have and check Facebook, even though it's all AI slop, is I think the term they use. It's just, I don't even, what they've done to it is baffling to me.
I just want to, I know we're about to go soon, but I need to point out that this would be another taco moment. Trump always chickening out because they didn't sell off the app. They leased it.
I'm glad they didn't.
But it's a taco moment.
Well,
this
he
is
didn't
exactly
want
what
to
I'm
do it
talking
in the first
about.
place.
I know, but he said all these harsh criticisms. Beijing still owns the app globally, still can do the same thing. So nothing really changed besides it's like, oh, you can lease my car real quick.
There are aspects of MAGA that are mad about this because they think it's a national security issue to let the Chinese be able to.
They're still running it.
Manipulate it. I always just say to that, well, but our own government prodded the previous owners of Twitter and the current owners of Facebook to tweak the content in a way that made the U.S. government happy.
If it was complete lies, let's not misinform the American public that needs real information.
Let's put our own house in order
social
before
media.
China. Well, we did the same thing. I don't think the Chinese government, but I can't control the Chinese government. You just, use it and be aware that they're spying on you and they're, tweaking it so it doesn't tell you anything about Tiananmen Square and won't let you make fun of Xi Jinping, and just got to be aware of that.
Well, RIP to what was a fun TikTok. Enjoy, y'all.
I mean, you can still do your stupid little dance videos.
My stupid dance videos? I'm a good dancer. Excuse me.
I meant you. That was the royal you, not you. I'm sure your little.
My dance videos are great.
Did you do some dance videos?
I did the Megan Thee Stallion is like Beyonce, savage.
Can you floss? All right, let's get out of here. That does it for us on Rising Live. Thanks so much for watching, and look out for more YouTube-exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.